Va bene. Buon pomeriggio, benvenuti alla seduta del pomeriggio. Tanto prima di cominciare vorrei dire che c'è un'altra testa che lei ha dato al suo amico Giuseppe Molteni e che si trovava adesso nel Castello Sforzesco a Milano. E in più ha dato alle sue amiche e amici a Canford Manor pezzi di così, che sono adesso a Canford Manor. Aveva questa abitudine con gli amici più distinti di dare questi regali molto belli. Tra le inevole conferenze a cui ho preso parte, il simposio internazionale intitolato Austrian Henry Layard tra l'Oriente e Venezia, curato nell'ottobre 1983 da Federico Falles e Bernard Hickey, resta indimenticabile. Invece di passare la giornata a discutere con storici dell'arte riguardo all'attribuzione di un quadro alla mano di Giorgione o a quello di Tiziano, in quella occasione un gruppo di accademici provenienti da diversi ambiti di studi, quali archeologia, scienze politiche e storia dell'arte, contribuirono alla ricerca su un eccellente uomo dell'età vittoriana, un uomo che aveva vissuto molte vite. Personalmente io venni a conoscenza di Layard grazie alla sua amicizia con Giovanni Morelli, il politico italiano che inventò la connoisseurship e di cui parlai nel 1983. Abbiamo un'immagine di Layard sconosciuto fra le immagini del National Portrait Gallery, la sua carta di visita che ha dato a Giovanni Morelli. Abbiamo un'immagine di Giovanni Morelli, del suo amico Giulio Rosso, un gran fotografo del Risorgimento con cui lui ha battagliato nelle 5 giornate a Milano. E da quel punto avevo un'amicizia molto forte. L'amicizia tra Layard e Morelli fu sincera e duratura. Layard, come abbiamo sentito stamattina, era un inglese poco convenzionale. Appassionata dell'Italia e della sua arte, sin da quando da ragazzo aveva vissuto a Palazzo Rucellai a Firenze, dove sembra egli dormisse in una stanza decorata da una pala di Filippino Lippi, oggi alla National Gallery di Londra, contro la quale era solito lanciare le sue scarpe. A Parigi, da genitori ugonotti, all'età di 18 anni conobbe Cavour, che lo introdusse alla politica del Risorgimento. Come Layard, Morelli era un protestante, oltre che un politico e diplomatico poco convenzionale. Entrambi amarono ardentemente l'arte italiana del Rinascimento. L'amicizia tra Layard e Morelli è testimoniata da una lunga serie di lettere conservate alla British Library. Nel suo ricordo biografico di Morelli, il primo mai scritto, completato poco dopo la morte dell'amico italiano, Layard si lascia andare ad un toccante tributo di quello che egli definì come un uomo incredibilmente erudito, con il quale era in costante contatto epistolare, e al quale devo la mia conoscenza dell'arte del Rinascimento italiano. Quando Layard e Morelli si incontreranno per la prima volta, erano entrambi scarpoli. Layard fu innamorata per molti anni di sua cugina, Lady Charlotte Guest. E qui vediamo una fotografia molto bella di Charlotte Silvi, datata 15 luglio 1861. Il suo amore, però, non fu corrisposto. Quando il marito di Charlotte morì, le rifiuta e Layard, decidendo di riposarsi con il più giovane Charles Schreiber, il tutor dei suoi figli. Gli fu destinato di avere una brillante carriera da politico e accademico. Nel 1869, all'età di 51 anni, Layard sposò Enid, la figlia di Charlotte. E qui vediamo una foto dello stesso anno, scattata da Julia Margaret Cameron. Come ripetuto dello stesso Enid nel suo diario, adesso è disponibile online, il matrimonio fu costantemente felice. Il più grande cambiamento per gli studiosi dal 1983 a oggi è l'avvento di Internet, che permette di trovare facilmente online una quantità immensa di risorse, tra cui il diario di Lady Layard. Come dimostrano dalla sessione di questo pomeriggio, Lady Layard, così come il suo marito, è divenuto una figura di grande interesse, una donna che nella maturità raggiunge grande potente. La prima relazione questo pomeriggio sarà data da Stefania Ermidoro, che ha un'altra sorpresa. Nonostante la ricchezza del British Museum, lei ha trovato un archivio personale dato recentemente all'Università di Newcastle e le parlerà sotto il titolo di A Family Treasure, the Layard Collection at the Newcastle University. Per favore, dire welcome a Stefania.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today and for having accepted our invitation to be to this conference in Venice. Okay, I hope you can all hear me now. Yes, so we go on with new materials and unpublished material. And the project that I'm presenting you today, it's a project that I have recently undertaken, very recently, since December 2017, in cooperation with Professor Mark Jackson, Senior Lecturer in Archaeology at the Newcastle University, and Mr. Ian Johnson, who is the Head of Special Collections and Archives at the Philip Robinson Library in Newcastle upon Tyne. The project aims to offer the first in-depth study of the so-called Layard collection, which is currently held precisely at the Robinson Library. It is a quite heterogeneous archive, donated in October 2016 by a donor in Layard's extended family. And she inherited the material in 1972. And all these documents, as I said, are unpublished and have never received a systematic investigation. Overall, the collection has considerable historical value because it contains evidence for Layard's activities as an ambassador to Madrid and Constantinople, as well as his experience as an archaeologist in the Near East. Moreover, it offers an insight on some aspects of Layard's personal life as well as of his acquaintances. Although these aspects are, of course, not unprecedented per se, we have already heard quite some information about it, the materials from the Newcastle University represent a novelty in light of their nature. The large and almost unmanageable mass of the so-called Layard papers at the British Library was in fact sorted either by Lady Layard or by Layard himself. And of course, they were both aware of the interest that this document might raise and of the possibility of a future publication, and therefore they operated a kind of a selection. In contrast, the materials from the Newcastle Layard collection come from a private context, and for this reason they might be considered as more genuine. As it is known, Layard's personal archives are scattered across no less than 18 different repositories in the UK. And then there are other documents in Italy, Spain, Turkey, the States, Germany, so they are really everywhere. The Layard papers consist of two main donations. 234 volumes were donated by Lady Layard, and 54 more volumes were given to the library by Layard's biographer, Gordon Waterfield, in 1970. And the total amounts to thousands of manuscripts. The collection donated to the Newcastle University is surely smaller. It counts about 200 letters, a dozen books, about 200 folios, and then there are scattered materials like photos, maps, various other objects. Some of them we'll see today. It is different from the previously known repositories in its being a family archive, which by its nature and content ensures quite original and significant results. A first scoping report has been carried out by Ian Johnson, but a more detailed catalogue is still to be done. In fact, these materials are not even catalogues, so I went there 3 or 4 times, and every time something different came out, because they also do not still have a precise catalogue of everything. Because the donor, she gave material from her larger family archive, so there are also other documents connected to either the Duquesne, later Duquesne family, or the Coulson Benkinsop, or I mean other families that are somehow connected. So it's one has to pick up the material that it's Layard related. So I would like to start from the very beginning, that I have myself just started, and so the photographs we will see today, I still have to identify all the pieces, all the places, and people who appear. So whichever help you might give me, it would be very important for me as well. My work on this collection falls within the activities fostered by the gruppo di ricerca interdisciplinare di storia degli studi orientali, di GRISSO in Rome, directed by Silvia Laura. And the group focuses on the reception of the ancient Near East in contemporary societies. And Newcastle represents an ideal location to carry out such a research, since the university has already recognized the significance of archival materials for the study of modern and contemporary societies. In particular, the Philip Robinson Library holds the archive of another eminent British personality, Gertrude Bell, who knew Layard, of course, and she was bringing Layard's book with her while she was traveling in the East. And very recently, again, in December 2017, the UNESCO has recognized the Gertrude Bell Archive as a collection of global significance, and now it is inscribed in the International Memory of the World Register, thus confirming the cultural and social relevance of the archival studies and the leading role of the Newcastle University in the archival management. This specific archive, we have just seen Charlotte Guest, that's just another image. But this archive once belonged to Charlotte Maria Guest, who was the oldest daughter of Charlotte Elizabeth Guest, and Enid's oldest sister. And to Maria's husband, Richard Duquesne. Enid and Maria, again, were the daughters of Charlotte, who was Henry's cousin. And we know from her diary that she called Henry Layard the Eastern Explorer, or Henry Layard the Ninevite. So Maria, Enid, and their siblings grew up by listening to Henry's magnificent adventures in Mesopotamia. So that's a passage from Charlotte's diary again, dated 1848. So that was the first time that Layard came back after his first campaign in the East. And Charlotte says, when service was over, we started a large party to walk. The children clustered around Henry Layard and got him to tell them stories about the East. Among these children, of course, there were Maria, who was 14, and Arid, who was just 5 years old. Henry became a regular at Camphor Manor, where he helped Charlotte to design and build the Nineveh porch. That was this huge collection, private collection, with original marbles from the East. So again, Enid, Maria, and their brothers and sisters thus knew about Nineveh ever since Henry's first return to the UK. And as I will show you later, the documents from the Newcastle archive prove that this interest passed likely through Maria to the Duquesne's family as well. From a preliminary examination carried out again in December 2017, some of the most interesting items kept in this collection might be identified with folios of Layard's personal copies of his volume Monuments of Nineveh, part of his personal library, family photographs. There are lots of family photographs of Enid, also some of them also here in Cappello, which were unknown before. Geographical maps, Layard's Bible with some annotation made by himself, archaeological drawings and sketches, newspaper cuttings and letters. Today I will present you 3 specific sets of documents which will give you an idea of what's inside this archive. We will start with this photo album. My hand is to give you an idea of how big this is. It's very large. And it has on the cover Henry's initials and the motto Perseverando, and it's not really clear, but there is also the stem of Layard himself. Again, I still have to identify all the individuals that appear in this album, but I could already make some quite promising observation. So the album opens with photos of Highcliffe Castle, which we see here on the left. And then, and I must acknowledge Cecilia for this identification. There are photos of Isnor Castle, and this identification was particularly important because then I could identify, again, thanks to Cecilia, other people who appear, who are Lord and Lady Isnor, the owners of the castle. And there's also a child somewhere. Also, the child appears with these Oriental dresses, and in a photo, he's smoking the narghile. So it's, yeah, they are quite funny photographs. So Lord and Lady Isnor, we know from Layard's autobiography and from Lady Layard's journal, were very good friends of Layard. And of course, I cannot say why they decided to take these photographs. Some of them are particularly dramatic. There are these images of this woman laying or pretending to be dead. No idea why. So I was trying to figure out when these images could be taken. And although Enid mentions 2 sojourns at Isnor Castle in 1873 and 1876, I'm quite certain that these images, in fact, are to be dated before their marriage. That's because we know that Layard went to Dorset in 1848 when the first time he came back. So I guess these images should be dated to around this date. And also, very recently, I find out that in 1999, 2 marble reliefs, certainly donated by Layard to the Isnor, Lord and Lady Isnor, were found in this castle in the cellars, together with a letter sent by Layard while he was still in Mesopotamia in 1847 to Lord Isnor. So I think we should take this donation and these photographs in the couple of years between 1847 and 1848. There are a lot of other places. I'm just showing you. I have still no idea where these places might be. If there is any place that caught your eyes, just please do let me know, because I still have to identify these places. Yeah, of course there is no reference point. There is only let's see if you can see here. It's not very clear, but there is a number 26, I think, on the left photographs. He just numbered the images, but I have no names, no place. There's really nothing to give me any idea about it. The second set of documents that I would like to present to you, it's collected in this large red folder, and for the most part, this consists of Layard's proofs for the first and the second series of his Monuments of Nineveh. We have already heard this morning about Layard's relationship with his artists, and these folios, I think, may add something to this knowledge on the selection and printing processes of the volume. We have the very first cover here of the volume. Somehow in the at some point the ball was just reversed on the other side, and also the drawing somehow changed. But the one on the left, it's the one that it's in Newcastle, in the folios. And then there are the pages with the proofs corrected by Layard himself of the cover and of the text and of the captions also for the images. And then there are some, we have 2 or 3 different images, sometimes with smaller differences of the same, 2 or 3 versions of the same images, sometimes with minor differences between them. However, in my personal opinion, the most interesting material in this red folder consists in scattered drawings of landscapes, monuments, and people made, I think, by Layard himself during his travel in the East. So here, for example, we have here there is there's written Dalmatica, so that's one landscape. Here there is nothing written, no signature, no word, nothing. Here there are some monuments, here again some reliefs, but they're really just everything, it's mixed up. So it's then there are some watercolors, and here I gave you an example. There are some sketches of palaces, and it's interesting, we have seen this morning that he numbered all the walls, and here in fact we have also notes and measurements, and I think I have 2 or 3 of these. So it's very interesting. And then there are also some inscriptions, some Greek inscriptions he copied on his travels. We have some copies of cuneiform inscriptions. Some of them, like these ones, were made by Layard himself, and some of them were sent to him by Loftus, and they were kind of dropped in this paper here. So I think in these pages confirm Layard's drawing skills, about which we have heard already this morning, or somehow, let's say. And his perceptiveness and interest throughout the travels in the East. So again, these images of men, of people that he met during his travel in the East. And we will hear something about his travel later today from Professor Falle's presentation. And we also have proof of his Assyriological interest with these copies of inscriptions. So I think it's a nice mix of what Layard was. More interesting, it's these photographs that I found inside this red folder, which has nothing to do with all the other material, but I think that's the very last image we have of Layard, or one of the last image. It's a nice picnic tea, or tea picnic, I think Lady Layard describes it. And of course, and here it's quite unusual to have the 2 of them together. We have Lady Layard and himself, of course. And looking in Lady Layard's journal, which are online, as we just heard, I found only 2 possible events that might be represented in this. And I'm quite sure that this image must be dated to the 7th of September, 1893. Layard would be that only 10 months after this photograph has been taken. And that's when Annie writes about, again, a tea picnic that they made at Glencairn Lodge, together with Ola and Nila. They were their favorite nieces. And why do I say that? It's because only 3 days before this 7th of September, so the 4th of September, we know again from Annie's journal that Richard Duquesne joined the group. So this would explain, since this archive belonged to Richard Duquesne, I think somehow that's the link. Of course, I cannot have any certain proof, but I think it's quite a sure proof. And yeah, reading from Annie's diary, she said, in the 1st of September, she said, Harry and I went to fish, and after much patience, we got 1 sea trout. And then she said Richard Duquesne arrived from town because Richard and Maria, they lived in London, so they have nothing to do with Newcastle upon Tyne. But he arrived to stay with us. The three girls went down to the station to meet him, and Harry and I greeted him at the top of the hill. So the two younger women here would be Ola and Nila Duquesne, and I'm still not sure who this younger man is. I don't have. There are so many names for these days in Lady Layard's diary that I cannot offer, so far at least, an identification. The third set of documents, and the last one, I would like to present is preserved in this blue writing box, originally owned by the donor's father. And it is an archive that the family chose to keep separate from the other documents. Well, the box in itself, it's very nice, I think. It's a writing box with space for the ink and the light. And when one opens it, inside, there were all sorts of treasures. So, again, a variety of material, including private correspondence dated 1869 to 1889, so 2 decades. And then there are bundles of published materials and press cuttings, family and biographical information, sketches, and Layard's passport. Now, the correspondence is extremely interesting. I will show you only some examples today. And I must say that, again, differently from the British Library, this is a correspondence between the two sisters. So it's mostly about Enid and Maria. About 180 letters are from Enid to Maria, and then we have only 10 letters from Henry to Maria again. The very first letters from both of them were written to announce to Maria their engagement. Here it's the first one we have from Enid, so in which she says, Henry Layard has proposed to me and I have accepted him. It happened on Thursday afternoon, and Henry said the mother, the M stands for mother as in the diary, and I only got the answer this morning. And 2 days afterwards, the 12th of January, rejoicing for Maria's approval, Henry writes to her, praising Enid's qualities and declaring that, I quote, "It will be the study of my life to make her happy." So we have heard just a few minutes before that it was indeed a happy marriage. Since this letter, we have many more documents, as I said, 180. And these letters address all sorts of topics. We have frivolous and daily ones, such as fashion, gardening, high society, family gossips, house management. But there is also, all these topics are quite astonishingly intertwined to descriptions of Layard's activities as an ambassador. Throughout the entire years when he was in Madrid. So he went to Madrid in 1869, and this archive starts in 1869, and he's here in Constantinople. He was there till 1880, and this archive ends in 1889. So the entire period of his activities are witnessed by this archive. We also have the proofs of the first journey here to Venice as a couple after the marriage. Enid fell in love with the city as soon as she arrived here. And here we have a nice description of her arrival, and she says to her sister, "Since writing the above, we have been out to Salviati's establishment to see the making of the mosaics, and it's most interesting to see boys making those mosaics, such as those in Camford Church." And then they went to Murano to see the glass blowing. Of course, Layard knew already Salviati, so the link with the Murano island was already very close, as we will hear later or tomorrow by Dr. Barovier Mentasti presentation. And of course, Layard was already well acquainted here in Venice, and as Lady Layard says, one meets all one's acquaintances just by sitting in Piazza San Marco. So they enjoyed a lot of evenings sitting there in Piazza San Marco. Since the very beginning, Enid's correspondence is filled with crowned heads, high political representative, authorities, and noblemen of every European state. And these were all guests of the Layards in their residences in Madrid, Venice, Constantinople, and the summer residence in Turkey. Politics, of which we will hear, of course, tomorrow something more by Professor Perry's presentation, is omnipresent, and these letters show Enid's direct involvement in his husband's activities. Yet, as I said, politics is combined with all sorts of other topics. Here I show you the very first letter sent from Constantinople, and we have seen the images this morning. Thanks to Silvia Laura's presentation, we have seen the images of Henry's arrival, and here we have the description of Henry's arrival. It's a very long letter. I think it's 10 pages long. Of course, she had a lot of things to say to her sister. I've just picked up a few passages, which is already quite a lot. I'm aware that there is a lot of text on this slide. But that was just to give you an idea. So she starts describing the arrival, so the procession that went through the entire city, which made a great impression on people. Lady Layard is always very careful to describe to her sister how successful Henry was, of course, and how he was, at least according to her, welcomed with people saying, "This ambassador is coming to save us." So Henry went directly to the Sultan to meet him. And we also have Layard's, Henry's impression about the Sultan, about the people he met. Of course, Henry was talking to his wife, and his wife was just reporting everything to her sister. And then we have also an idea of how he was working. So he begins work at 8 a.m. I never see him all day except a moment at meals, which he has to hurry through. And then she keeps on going about how he was working, and then that's the same letter. And then we have what she was doing. She was famous for her receptions, both in Madrid and in Constantinople. So she confirms to her sister that she started again her reception for the English society, staying in Constantinople. And then gardening. She was really a lover of gardens, everything that has to do with garden. Also, the garden here in Cacappello was very beautiful. And so the very first things she describes to her sister are the gardens in Constantinople. And yeah, I just talked about gardens. Here we have a few images of Cacappello. So when she arrived, she started her garden, and she was even sending samples of her flowers to her sister, attached to her letter. And we have all the history of Cacappello in these letters, from when she asked to, they started to look for a place, when they settled down, with a very funny description of their moving in. And the plan, we have the plan. She was trying to explain to her sister where Cacappello was located. So we have Cacappello, and then she writes Ca' Foscari. And then there are the other houses. So Salviati was living here. She was just giving some coordinates. And then there is a map of the house. So it might be also interesting to see how they lived here. And of course, she describes also the Venetian society and all the people they met while they were living here. And all the well-known acquaintances of the couple are mentioned, including Morelli and Brown, and we have here an example. This letter actually starts mentioning Cortellazzo, and then starts talking about weather and health and all sorts of things. And then they said, we have not yet had any continued heat, as we have constant thunderstorm. And then she starts saying who their guests will be. So Morelli is coming, perhaps Count Maffei, who was the Italian chargé d'affaires Madrid. Rodon Brown continues to flourish, and then there is this description of Rodon Brown. And then, as I was saying, there is the mention of the Prince and Princess of Wales, because, of course, they knew basically everyone. So, yeah, of course, we will hear more about the people they met also from Dr. Florio's paper and Dr. Ross' presentation just after me. One, as I started saying before that Maria and Enid grew up listening to Henry's description and grew up actually looking at the Assyrian marbles, because the Nineveh porch was just in their home. And here, quite some years after that, in 1876, Maria writes to Enid asking to Henry about a specific marble which was in Camford. I don't know why she was interested in this. There are letters number 95 and 96 also mention this marble, so I might find out why Maria was asking about it. But Enid answer, Henry says some of the marbles at Camford were found at Kuyunjik and some at Nimrud, but he thinks the piece you have chosen for what we don't know, must be from the former place, that's from Kuyunjik, and as such you may safely describe it. To whom, again, we don't know. I will finish my presentation with some, as I said, the other material that it's included in this blue writing box, because it gives also new insights on how Layard's figure was perceived in contemporaries or subsequent generation. There are in fact also 23 letters written by Enid's mother, Charlotte, Denise, and other descendants. The later family correspondence and other related documents may provide new insights on the dispersal of some Assyrian reliefs that Henry distributed among members of his family or friends. In fact, I have found letters that attest both the donation of material to the British Museum and or the sale of other material via auction houses. Among, again, this material, I have the Layard's passport, which attests his travels from the 9th of September 1859 to the 3rd of August 1861. And this particular passport complements that of the John Murray archive in Edinburgh, which is digitized, so it's online for everyone to see. But there is another one which is so far unstudied in the Middle East Center of St. Anthony's College at Oxford. Then there are some family information and genealogical trees, Lady Layard's funeral service program, a pamphlet entitled Order of Service for the dedication of the memorial window to Enid, wife of Sir Hoston Henry Layard. And I have here the project of the window, which has been realized, and it's now in the Anglican Church in Venice, in St. George, which is just on the other side of the Accademia Bridge. There are drawings of the Star of the Order of Charity with accurate description of the colors and the material, and there is also on the other page the description of the ribbon, and that's the order we have seen also a few minutes before in the famous photographs of Lady Layard. There are more drawings by Henry and more watercolors, very smaller one. A pin badge from the Huguenot Society, of which Henry was the president. A letter opener with the presentation box signed by the Princess Victoria, who was Layard's very good friend. This one here, yeah. And then there is this one, which is a fragment of pottery. Sorry for the sharpener, but it was the only way to give you an idea of the size, because, I had nothing else and the archivist couldn't help me in that day. So that's the pottery, and in the back there is the dedication label. Unfortunately, as you can see, it's very damaged. what I can figure out is that it has been donated, I think, from Rassam. I mean, here I see that it's Rassam and it's in 1878. I think I might read Temple maybe from here, but yeah, I was not in the best condition to read this. I didn't have the right light, so I have to go back and see it. That's the only photo I have so far. But yeah, that's another interesting material that I will have to study. And I think I might I might find something whenever I go back to the British Library, because Rassam used to write to Layard every time he was sending something to him or receiving something by him. So that's something that might help. So as I hope I have shown you, this small yet interesting archive reflects all the aspects that characterized Layard's life. The writer, the editor of texts and drawings, the archaeologist, the British man in love with Venice, its culture and its society, the diplomat whose activity as an ambassador is described by his ever-present wife, Arid, and finally the art lover. At the end of this project, ideally by the end of this year, I will offer a comprehensive catalogue raisonné of the entire Layard's collection held in Newcastle University. I will certainly provide an overview of the most interesting objects, some of which we have seen today. Furthermore, digitized images of the manuscripts of all the letters will be used to create a dedicated website at the Newcastle, hosted on the Newcastle University server. The Layard collection, although not so large as other archives, contains some rare materials which reflect in a condensed but significant way Henry and Enid Layard's life. For this reason, I believe its study promises to add to the already impressive knowledge on these emblematic figures of the Victorian age. Thank you.
Well, there's nothing more exciting than a new archive. We've just been given little glimpses of it. And the idea that Newcastle will be ahead of the British Museum and putting it online is really quite interesting. Perhaps the British Museum might be encouraged to put their Layard papers online, which are enormous and invaluable in many different ways. Now, we have a change in our program. I don't know whether to speak Italian or English. Perhaps English. We have a change in our program. Rosa Barovier can't be here, and instead we're going to have the paper delivered by Mario Fallis, delivered by his postgraduate student on Layard, Selle, and Minor Kellogg.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here to read Professor Fallis' paper. I will be reading. Excusing myself with the organizers of this meeting and with all colleagues for my absence, due to family commitments, I send my most affectionate greetings to all of them, welcoming them to this beautiful Venetian Academy, where Lucio Milano and I are members, and I entrust this paper to the capable voice of Miss Francesca Minen. My paper will deal with a painting in a private collection, depicting Layard and his servant Saleh. We'll get back to the painter later. For now, let us talk about the artist. This was an American, Minor Kilburn Kellogg by name, who, although very different from the English archaeologist and politician by birth, culture, achievements, and nature, nevertheless shared with Layard the sense of travel, adventure, eclecticism, and self-promotion, coming finally to also own a remarkable collection of Italian art. Kellogg was born 3 years before Layard, August the 22nd, 1813, in Mangus Square, New York State, from a middle-class family of strong ethical and social principles. And at the age of 4, he arrived in Ohio, which would legitimately claim him as its son. In the flat Midwest, he spent his youth between Cincinnati, where he grew up and studied, and Indiana, where his family embraced for 2 years, 1825 and 1826, the utopian community of the English social theorist Robert Owen in New Harmony. However, it seems that the young miner observed in a very haphazard manner the rigorous precepts of educational and social democracy that fascinated his parents, and so finally, singled out for his artistic talent, he was put to study painting. On his return to Cincinnati, Kellogg met at the Swedenborgian school the budding artist Hiram Powers, 9 years older than himself, who sculptured his bust in 1828. Kellogg also had a musical talent. He studied the flute, and in particular the violin, of which he became a performer over time, and so played a small part in the musical pictorial experiments in the local Western Museum along with Powers, and frequented with him the curious bazaar of Greek, Moorish, Gothic, Chinese style, open on the shore of the Ohio River by English Francis Trollope, the memoirist mother of the most famous writer Antony. All these characters, linked to the Midwest and to forms of social utopian spiritualism with artistic implications, Powers, the Trollopes, and Kellogg, would meet again in Florence during the following decade. Already in 1831, Kellogg decided to open his own studio in Cincinnati, but soon afterward he left to look for new outlets on the rich East Coast between New York and New Jersey, getting by with the violin and with random portraits, sometimes of politicians and high-ranking officials. A personal contact obtained through this way with President Martin Van Buren assured him a scholarship for access to the West Point Military Academy in the years 1838-1839. Here he studied painting and began to send his works to regional art exhibitions and fairs. Upon his return to Cincinnati's artistic circles, he was contacted by local Democrats to portray the 1812 anti-British war hero Andrew Jackson. His portrait of Old Hickory gave rise to many commissions for copies and eventually led him to perform a portrait of President Van Buren as well. The early 30s thus saw Kellogg, armed with the task of diplomatic messenger for the State Department, cross the Atlantic. Having exhausted his official duties in Europe, he decided to carry out his own grand tour, mainly focused on Italy. He then made visits to Rome and Pompeii, to then settle down in Florence in 1841. Here, he made copies of ancient masters on commission for the PT, getting enough to live and also allowing himself some occasional trip. His home in Via Santa Maria, with a studio in Via de' Serragli, was adjacent to his friend Powers' studio, who was already in Florence since 1837, and he joined the ménage of his older colleague, whose fame was rapidly rising. Powers, on the other hand, admired in minor all those abilities of relationship with people and of persuasion that were defective to him. So, when he finished in 1843 the Greek Slave, the statue in dry but polished neoclassical style for which he is especially famous, and decided to send it around America, Kellogg had little difficulty persuading him to entrust himself to administrative and practical management of the artistic tour. Before this enterprise, in favor of his friend, however, he decided to embark on an inspirational journey to the East, thus becoming the forerunner of the Orientalist painters of America. We thus find Kellogg in Egypt at the end of 1833, first in Alexandria, then by both along the Nile with a company of various nationalities, with pleasant hunting trips on the river banks until the arrival at Karnak, where the local governor received foreigners with pomp and generosity, lending them horses for the night exploration of the ruins. Back in Cairo, Kellogg began to wear Oriental clothes and visited the Pyramid of Cheops, inscribing his name on the stones. Despite a series of illnesses, he insisted on going to the Sinai Peninsula where, with his Swedenborgian curiosity for the Bible, he made a large solitary tour in search of the mountain of the actual divine revelation, carrying out a vast series of drawings, then translated on canvas. Up to May 1844, he traversed the Holy Land, reaching as far as Damascus, but he had already returned to Florence at the time of the disastrous flood of the Arno on November 3 of that year, on which he wrote for the American newspapers. The East, however, still beckoned. In December of the same year, we find Kellogg in Constantinople at the invitation of Dabney Smith Carr, American ambassador to the Sublime Porte. The two, who must have known each other through Kellogg's portrait activity, even shared a home in the Ottoman capital, and the painter was able to frequent the circle of Anglo-American residents in the city, dominated by the influential figure of Sir Stratford Canning. Canning, 1786-1880, had been appointed British ambassador to the Sublime Porte for the first time in 1825, but, despite his efforts to negotiate a just peace after the war for the independence of Greece, he was soon recalled by London. After a few years in politics, he again obtained the same embassy in 1842. Here, until 1852, thanks to his consummate diplomatic experience, he would have greatly increased British influence at the court of the Sultan and his Grand Viziers, attempting to control the progressive decay of the Ottoman Empire. A possible collapse of the sick man of Europe was feared in various foreign cabinets of the whole continent for its unpredictable international consequences, but openly hoped for in others, in view of future imperialistic and commercial expansions. It was Canning who introduced Minor Kilburn Kellogg to a young Englishman who had recently become his personal secretary, Austin Henry Layard. Layard had arrived at the British Embassy in Constantinople at the end of 3 years of adventurous and often perilous journeys, in full flight from his family and from the professional and social duties that had been planned and organized for him. I need not recount here Layard's early years. All of us here know of his excellent upbringing in a British family of Huguenot origins with many foreign travels, and how later, after his father's death, the family fell on hard times, and how he was unhappily forced to train as a barrister in his uncle's office, and how the unique chance to accompany to Ceylon an associate, Henry Mitford, who could not stand maritime travel, brought him in 1839 overland to the Levant, and then to Mesopotamia for his first illuminating vision of the Assyrian ruin hills. In 1830, despite danger of an impending Persian attack on Mesopotamia, Layard and Mitford had joined an eastward-bound caravan dressed in local garb, and so had visited the majestic monument of Beaver-the, where Henry Rawlinson was working on the decipherment of the famous trilingual rock inscription. After this, Mitford chose to continue on to Ceylon, while Austin Henry decided to explore Khuzestan, the territory of southern Persia east of the Tigris, inhabited by the indomitable Bakhtiari nomadic tribes and almost unknown to European travelers. Thus began an extraordinary journey between the basins of the Karun and Kerkhak rivers and the Shatt el Arab, where the Euphrates and the Tigris mix their waters before plunging into the Persian Gulf. A journey of which Layard kept extensive journals, but whose writing in the form of a book took place almost half a century later, in the peace of his Venetian home at Ca' Cappello. The journey into Khuzestan was all the more difficult, as the government authorities were extremely suspicious of the young man as a possible British agent in a moment of Anglo-Persian hostility. Moreover, the mountain tribes of the Bakhtiari, while fighting jointly against the assimilation desired by the Persian government, were devoid of internal unity and indeed were prone to permanent mutual conflict for raiding purposes, like medieval barons, according to Layard. In fact, among these wild tribes, Austin Henry came across a generous figure of political leader, Hilkhani, Muhammad Taqi Khan, of the group of the Chahar Lang, who welcomed him with friendship, along with his wife Khatun Jan Khanum, especially after the young Englishmen managed to save their son Hussein, who was seriously ill, and doomed, according to the daughters of the village, with doses of quinine and Dr. Dover's powder, largely used in England at the time. Muhammad Taqi Khan had visions of a peaceful future and productive outcomes for his people in the trade of the Persian Gulf, but he had the misfortune of encountering a thug and cruel governor of Isfahan, the eunuch Manuchir Khan, whose original name was Yenikopolov, a Georgian from Tbilisi. The governor, just while Layard was there in 1841, threatened to annihilate the tribe by military means, taking young Hussein as hostage first and then asking for the surrender of Muhammad Taqi Khan himself, who gave himself in for the good of his people despite the violent opposition of his beautiful wife. The rest of Layard's stay in Khuzestan, although marked by comings and goings with Baghdad, was therefore spent on journeys from one town to another, trying to get, by personal or diplomatic support, the release of the tribal chief, but in vain. He saw Muhammad Taqi Khan for the last time forced into severe irons and resigned to his fate, while his wife and other women in the family lived in the capital in great poverty. After this, having escaped Manuchir Khan's attempt to arrest him and other Bakhtiari tribal chiefs' efforts to kill him, he descended toward the Shatt el-Arab, risking several times to be robbed, or worse, by the Arab Bedouin tribes of Mesopotamia. Finally, ragged and in native clothes, he returned definitely to Baghdad, where he was informed that the Sublime Porte intended to declare war on Persia to recover the port of Muhammara, today Khorramshahr, on the Persian Gulf, and that, precisely for this reason, Ambassador Canning in Constantinople would have liked a first-hand account of what Layard had seen and heard during his travels. He thus arrived in the Ottoman capital in July 1842, arousing the sympathy and interest of Canning, who soon employed him in various informational missions on his behalf. At the end of 1844, after 2 years of pleasant social life on the Bosphorus, but also of lively diplomatic trips here and there to Europe, Austin Henry received news that he had been nominated by London as a paid attaché of Canning to the embassy. In this new official capacity, therefore, he met Minor Kilbur Kellogg. The two young men got along immediately, due to the common passion for Oriental travel, and Layard had little difficulty in convincing the clever American painter to follow him on a visit to the ancient Haizanoi, site of a famous sanctuary of Zeus, of a thermal building, and a vast Hellenistic Roman theatre at the modern Chavadar Hisar. The site, identified and described only a few years ago, was reached by ship to Ismet, and from there via land through Bursa, where travelers climbed to the Olympus, an easy climb, according to Kellogg. From Bursa, through arid valleys, they finally reached the Monumental complex, and while Layard copied ancient inscriptions, Kellogg drew the details of the building. We worked as beavers to the first to make known the details and value of these ruins, until that moment only the subject of hints from previous travelers, Kellogg wrote with some exaggeration. There were no further archaeological excursions between the two in the 9 months that Kellogg spent in Constantinople. On the other hand, in the course of 1845, Layard was working to convince Canning to grant him permission and the means to go digging in Assyria, insisting above all on the interest that the archaeological enterprise could have had for the prestige of England, since the French, with Paul-Émile Botta, whom Layard had met in Mosul in 1842, were already hard at work in the search for ancient Nineveh. And what happened after Canning granted his request is well known to all. Kellogg, on his part, returned to Florence, and except for a short trip to Asia Minor a decade later, he no longer visited the Orient. From 1847 on, moving from Florence, he began to cleverly sponsor the Greek slave throughout America, while promising himself with great success in terms of public and revenue for his friend powers. Finally, in 1855, Kellogg moved to Paris, where he also became a trader in art, and then to London, where he married and had a daughter. After the Civil War, he returned to America, first to Baltimore, then from 1870 to Toledo, Ohio, where, with the exception of an artistic trip to Texas in 1873, he remained until his death in 1889. In the early months of 1845, on the other hand, Kellogg and Layard certainly had made strong bonds of friendship. These would result in a warm correspondence over the years, and in the work of promoting Layard's Assyrian discoveries and books that Kellogg undertook in the United States through newspaper articles and public lectures. But at the time, Kellogg surely heard the details of the extraordinary journey to the land of the Bakhtiari from Layard's own voice, and his young English friend must have seemed a truly romantic figure, worthy of being immortalized on canvas. Proof of this is the portrait of Layard in Constantinople, in standing pose, with long hair and mustache, dressed in a sort of Oriental robe that he keeps closed with his left hand, his face in three-quarters view, with a faraway gaze. But above all, proof of this is the picture entitled Layard with his servant Saleh, which bears an autograph of Kellogg on the back. It indicates that the painting was painted in Constantinople and depicts the protagonists in Bakhtiari clothes. In this soil, the American painter builds with some skill an Orientalist figurative type, placing in the background the plains and mountains of Persia, and on a nearer plane a tent, in which a figure of female attendant can be glimpsed, with a tea tray on her hand. The foreground shows two figures side by side. On the left, slightly more advanced, a bearded man is standing, in repose and looking forward, with his left foot resting on a stone, and a rifle in the right, held upright by its barrel. He wears a conical woolen hat, a red cloak that covers a half-open blue tunic over a white shirt, and red trousers with high curved pointed shoes. From the waist hang a flask, a gunpowder container, and a dagger in its sheath. Beside him sits another man with only a mustache. His clothing, although less varied, light headgear, blue tunic, does not seem different from that of his companion. He looks down, examining a pipe, held by its tip above his crossed legs. Just in front of him, on the ground, we see two vases with a typical elongated neck shape suitable for a hookah or nargileh, one of which has been overturned. The first impression one has looking at the work and knowing its title is that the man with the rifle is the expedition leader Layard, and that the person sitting with downturned gaze is the servant Saleh, occupied in the household chores or the like. But that things are very different is shown by a watercolor of a lesser quality executed in Constantinople in April 6, 1843 by the Maltese Orientalist painter Amedeo Preziosi. In it, Layard is depicted in profile, in exactly the same pose as the standing figure of Kellogg's painting, and in an almost identical garment, brocade overcoat, toga, shirt, trousers, Oriental shoes, and with the architectural profile of a fortress, perhaps, in the intention of the artist, the Kalatul, the fortress of Muhammad Taghi Khan, in the midst of the background. It is precisely through this comparison that Kellogg's painting can be interpreted exactly to the opposite of a first impression. The standing bearded man, the warrior who searches the horizon, represent the servant and Layard, only bearing a mustache, as in the portrait by Preziosi and in other depiction by Kellogg, is the seated individual who wields his pipe with unabsorbed air. In essence, Kellogg must have seen Preziosi's watercolor, most probably Layard himself, because in his painting he took up all the characteristics of the Bakhtiari costume and of the warlike pose, transferring them to the servant, and portraying the European master, on the contrary, as a man of thought, serene in his being, well protected from external dangers. And a further pictorial testimony shows us that this anthropological hierarchy was figuratively congenial to Kellogg. If we observe the oil on plywood, in which, again in 1845, according to the established judgments, he represented with a certain scrupulousness the ruins of Hasrum, Asia Minor, that is, the remains of the Haizanoi theatre visited together with Layard. We will notice two small figures side by side in the lower left corner. The right-hand one, in Western clothes, with sober colors, sitting on a big stone, intent on drawing with his gaze bent, corresponds to Kellogg himself, while the left-hand one, standing upright with one foot resting on the same stone, in multicolored native clothes and turban, and with a rifle held by the barrel, is again the Eastern servant who guards his European master. To sum up, Layard with his servant Saleh by Manor Kilburn Kellogg represents, like many other Orientalist paintings of the time, a pictorial transfer ex post and in studio of actual visual experiences, according to the ideological canons of the time. The essential rules of 19th century Orientalist thought, as depicted by Edward Said, are all present in Kellogg's work. The Orient is certainly a backward place, where all the progress attained in the West is still a long way in coming. At the same time, it is marked by background elements of remarkable artistic and technical refinement, architecture, clothing, that brings to mind a glorious past, from the imposing ruins of the ancient pre-classical or classical civilization to the splendor of semi-ruined mosques, to the rich brocades of the traditional clothes worn even by humble people. The only difference between Kellogg's painting and those of many of his contemporaries was that the Ohio painter had never seen and never saw directly the landscape of Khuzestan. His portrayal of the Orient was therefore idealized to a degree above the norm, and as it derived exclusively from the colorful travel stories of his English friend Layard. In point of fact, the real Saleh was a young man from Luristan, idest from a land close to that of the Bakhtiari, whom Layard had met at Kermanshah, and whom he hired to accompany him in his last attempts to free Mohammed Taqi Khan. Layard describes him as a courageous, faithful, and trustworthy, with a good understanding of Arabic as well. In addition, the young lord had a loose tongue, and in the evening, among the tribal chiefs sitting in a tent, Arabs or Bakhtiari as they may have been, he managed to invent the most bizarre motivations for his master's wandering in those lands where Europeans did not set foot, or told stories and traditional legends. He was also skilled in the song of the lure, especially if dampened with the good wine of Shiraz. Layard states in his memoirs that Saleh was so devoted to him that he had walked all the way from Baghdad on foot to visit him in Constantinople, so that I had to host him for some time, to my great inconvenience, in the small quarters I occupied. The date of this visit is not known, but it seems unlikely that any of Layard's portrayers in the Ottoman capital, whether Presiede or Kellogg, ever actually made his acquaintance. Thank you for your kind attention.
Please convey our thanks to Professor Fallis for this rather unknown episode and to the extraordinary additions to the iconography of Layard's appearance as the archaeologist in Oriental dress. Thank you very much. Do we have a small break now? Yes. Okay. Tea break now.